This is so interesting because New York is so different than Boston when it comes to how things are divided. The way it's really structured here is there are these bigger companies and then smaller books within them. So, like, for example, Vineyard Road is an awesome book here in Boston. And then they have like Benvenusa, Bobby Stuckey's portfolio within theirs. Or like Martinetti is a huge company and they have, for example, Portovino or Dalaterra within theirs.
Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, your host, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the U.S. market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests in every episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned from the episode. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us this week to learn more about the U.S. market. Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market on the Italian Wine Podcast. As we record today's episode, it's March, International Women's Month, which is an especially meaningful time to spotlight some of the women in our industry who are shaping the future of wine in the United States. The wine industry, much like many legacy industries, has historically been male-dominated, but today we're seeing powerful voices redefining what leadership, education, and accessibility look like in the wine industry. So joining us today, we're very excited to have Brittany Tangora, sommelier, wine director of the Nautilus Pier 4 in Boston, Massachusetts, and the creator of Wine with Brit, a digital platform dedicated to making wine, especially Italian wine, approachable, inclusive, and engaging for modern consumers. Through her work both on the restaurant floor and on social media, Brittany represents a new generation of wine professionals and wine women who are bridging tradition and innovation. Welcome to the show, Brittany. It's so great to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So excited to dive in. But before we do, to highlight our 3 key takeaways for our conversation today for our listeners. Number 1, how Italian wine is performing today in Boston, specifically in on-premise market. Number 2, the power of social media as it relates to wine buying behavior. And finally, what it's like navigating this industry as a woman in wine and why that matters for Italian producers specifically. So, Brittany, you're a sommelier based in Boston and the creator of Wine with Brit. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey into wine and specifically Italian wine?
Yes. So I have been in wine since 2017, and it kind of was a happy accident. I was working at a little wine bar in Albany, New York, which is upstate. And I was studying actually for law school and started learning about wine while I was working and was really enjoying it. And actually, the owner of the restaurant, she was second generation, and she had her introductory sommelier. I thought that was the coolest thing. She was hosting all of these wine dinners.
Second generation Italian or?
Irish, actually.
Irish, okay. Oh,
yes,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so she was hosting all of these wine dinners at the restaurant, and I would always volunteer to work them. I just started to fall in love with learning about wine, and then basically my law studies, it came to the point where I could retake the LSAT or keep learning about wine, and I went the wine route. I come from a very Italian-American family, so I've always grown up. Yeah. So I've always grown up with wine and food just always being around and just really being a part of my upbringing. And so it just felt natural to lean in. Then Italian wine, again, it's like I remember being at my great aunt's and everybody drinking the Carlo Rossi out of the liter jug. Yeah, no, the gallon jug.
Oh, yes. The 3-liter bowling balls.
Yeah, exactly. Out of the little tumbler glasses. And so I totally just leaned into really my heritage and my upbringing. And I actually had the opportunity to travel in 2021 to do harvest at Azienda Agricola Cos in Victoria.
Amazing.
And that was awesome. We worked really closely with our
harvest gig. So that's incredible.
Oh my God. Yeah, I got really, really lucky. And I still will bump into Giusto at different events, which is so special. We worked really closely with Ariana Ocapinti and her interns as well. And then I really looked into how I could get closer with Italian wine and studying more and really making that my niche. and I found Via.
Amazing.
So I took my first class. I went to Verona in 2022. I did not pass the first time, but it was the best experience ever.
Glad you got to go to Italy and do it. That's the best.
Oh my God. And I obviously fell in love with Verona because how can you not? And I am still friends with a lot of people that I took the class with. And actually, one of the women who was in the 2022 class, her name is Noelle Dorsey. She is in wine in Boston as well. So
Amazing.
she's a sommelier at a restaurant here. And I remember she won best essay. So she was very well spoken, very well written. And I remember admiring her even then. So very cool that, worlds collide. And then I ended up taking the course again in March 2024 in New York, and I passed. That was the best. There's no other feeling like it when your hard work and all your studying pays off. Yeah, I try to really get as close with Italian wine as I can, especially in the Boston market. So
amazing.
Get into that too.
Well, it sounds like it was a really natural journey from your background and your heritage, but did require a bit of a leap of faith and a pivot from that background in law. But at least you were used to studying for hard tests, right?
So yeah, I'm sure absolutely.
Yeah, in your journey in wine. So, Brittany, talk to us a little bit more about Boston. I know you've been there a couple years now as a beverage director in the wine industry, and it sounds like you're really deeply involved with the community. So, talk to us a little bit about just the Boston wine drinker. How would you describe them in today's day and age?
So it's so funny because I think from an outside perspective, Boston seems like it's on par with New York and Chicago and, but in Boston, we joke about how we're almost 10 years behind in New York, like New York, for example. I say that with love. I'm so happy to be here. It's honestly the way that I look at Boston as a market is that it's almost like a gold mine and it's just waiting to be attacked, essentially. So there's a lot of opportunity to grow, and that's exciting. So it's a really cool place to be, and there's a lot of growth going on. So the average wine drinker here, I would say, is a little bit in the dark in a way. And so you have this opportunity to guide them to try new things. And I think in the world that we're in, people are more receptive to trying new things. And especially when you present them with the stories and, the history and the culture, everything behind the majority of Italian winemakers. And then just wine in general. So I think people are being a little bit more open to trying new grapes that they may not have heard of.
Okay.
If they're looking for a Sancerre, but if you're asking if they're willing to pivot, maybe putting them in the direction of Friuli, for example, and, save money. I mean, Friuli's getting up there now, but, to try something new that's still going to get them excited about what they're drinking.
Cool. So they're open to discovery. They're open to being guided when it comes to Italian wine, but they're not necessarily coming in knowing that what a Friulian wine is, or to know the quality, the regional quality that you can find within Italy for the types of wines they like to drink.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that winemakers are now starting to come to the Boston market more and more, which has been awesome. So the opportunity to have wine dinners, bar takeovers, what have you, with these smaller wineries that, have been farming forever, but people just haven't had the opportunity to try their wines. So it's really exciting.
Nice. So you're seeing a lot more engagement from the suppliers themselves coming to the market. As far as the structure of the industry goes up there, do you work with, is it dominated by a couple key distributors or is it more independent distributors? I'm always curious about that because every market's a little bit different.
Yeah, so this is so interesting because New York is so different than Boston when it comes to how things are divided.
Right.
So, for example, New York has Palantir Selections, which is a very, familiar book, right? Well, a lot of what Palantir distributes in New York is divided into a few different books in Boston. And then the way it's really structured here is there are these bigger companies and then smaller books within them. So for example, Vineyard Road is an awesome book here in Boston. And then they have Ben Venusa, Bobby Stuckey's portfolio within theirs, or Martinetti is a huge company, and they have, for example, Portovino or Dalaterra within theirs.
Got it. So you have like larger companies that are the umbrellas for then these smaller portfolios that are more specialized in Italian wine.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So you're interfacing with both in a way. Like you have, I'm sure, your contact, but then you might separately have your contact with the specialized portfolio as well, more directly.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. So not as much direct import. I think I think some books are really trying to focus on that, especially with the tariffs and just kind of the unknown of all of that.
Right.
These smaller wineries that want to showcase their hard work, but then can't afford to, get it over here. So I think we are seeing some more direct imports, which is really special.
Cool.
And really cool that these companies are trying to provide those opportunities.
And it sounds like a market where if you make the investment, you visit the market, you invest in it, that it could pay off because like you said earlier in the conversation, the consumer's open and there is opportunity to introduce them to new wines, which is exciting.
Right. And to that point, the wine community, as in most major cities, the wine community is small and mighty. Even in New York, I remember it's like, everybody.
Yep.
But in Boston especially, and I do think that Boston does have this rock star team of people, especially on premise, but even, in sales, et cetera, that are really working together to try to bring light to these amazing winemakers, wineries, and really working hard to make sure that their lists showcase that. So it's really exciting. And I think everybody here is really supportive of one another, which is a cool thing to be a part of.
Amazing. That's awesome. So talk to us a little bit about what the Boston wine consumer is drinking when it comes to Italian wine. I know, like you said, they're pretty ripe for discovery, but what are the styles, the wines, the regions that they are gravitating towards if they do come in and sit down and might know what they want to drink?
So obviously, as with anything in wine, people gravitate towards what they're comfortable with. So Obviously, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, Sicily is definitely, I think, more of a comfort piece for people now, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
People have heard of Etna. They might not have heard of, somewhere like where Fido Montoni is coming from, for example. But I think, again, that's, something that people are seeing more and more in the market. So there's a comfortability there. Definitely still the Nebbiolo, the Sangiovese, Sicilian, and then when you do have people in place that are getting people more comfortable, currently we have By the Glass, Marco Faluga's Friuli, just their Friuli Bianco blend. And we're marketing it as a Sauvignon Blanc blend.
Ah, gotcha.
And there's probably a minuscule amount of Sauvignon Blanc, and the idea is to get people to just try it. Again, with it being March and Women's History Month, we have Ilaria Faluga being the winery, the winemaker, the winery owner now, and really the presence of the brand. So that's really exciting. So, and then we have Chiara Condello. We have her Sangiovese di Proprio, and that's being very well received. Again, it's like these grapes that people are familiar with, but putting them in a different place, right? Like, did you know Emilia Romagna makes Sangiovese? And trying to get people more comfortable and excited about learning. And actually, at the restaurant that I'm at, I sell a lot of Umbrian wines. Again, like some Sangiovese. But I do think the way that the wines present, it pairs amazing with our food here. So that's exciting.
Okay.
And then I think when you find certain people and you can start to talk about native and indigenous grapes, obviously it's a read, but I think when you can start to talk to people about it, they're down to try. And the worst that happens, I always tell people, I'm like, the worst that happens is you tried something new and it's not what you usually go for, but you tried something new. Yeah, now you know.
Exactly.
And then we'll try something new the next time and something different.
Like with the haircut or like your hair color, right?
Right. And typically these native grapes are, something like Elvia Conio's Nascetta, for example. Mm-hmm. You're not breaking the bank for the bottle. And if it's not up their alley, I'll drink it. Like, I'll take it off your hands.
That's a good solution. Yeah.
It's these things that aren't like the biggest commitment, but also something fun and new. And I think for the most part, people are down. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. It sounds like so the market's like in this not quite mature stage, but growing and learning. And
Yes.
there are some non-negotiable categories on a list. Like you have to have a great Sangiovese, Chianti, Brunello section and a good Barolo section. Some Sicily is becoming, let's say, a non-negotiable on a list. But outside of that, there's a lot of opportunity to introduce new Italian wines, especially when you're introducing them in the lens of something perhaps more familiar, like what you're doing with that Friuli brand from Faluga, and like making it, more approachable from just how you're presenting it. Like I think something simple like that, but it's giving it a lens for which anyone reading the wine list could understand, oh, this is going to taste a little bit like Sauvignon Blanc. I like Sauvignon Blanc. I'm going to try that. That sounds interesting. Yeah, right. Exactly. Cool. So Brittany, I want to talk a little bit also about your work off the restaurant floor and what you're doing to build your community digitally and through your Instagram platform. Tell us a little bit about Wine with Brit and how you came to start that, and what is Wine with Brit? Just tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I started Wine with Brit in 2020. I had the opportunity to go to ICC in New York for the intensive sommelier experience, where I did 10 weeks in the culinary program under 11 master sommeliers based out of New York. And we were 1 week away from taking our certified exams, and COVID happened. So to stay relevant with studying, I decided to just create a platform where I was kind of holding myself accountable. I started really doing like at home. I did Zoom wine tastings, kind of like backyard wine tastings, just to keep myself tasting. And I mean, what really else was there to do? COVID, 2020, besides drink some good wine. Yeah. So it started really as just an accountability studying platform and just kind of showing what I was doing and how I was trying to stay relevant. And I also think there was a movement in 2020, during COVID in the wine world where people were sharing their experiences, good and bad. Mm-hmm. And I think people really came together to say, you don't just have to do one track to learn wine. There's many, many resources to learn about wine and share about wine. And so I felt really inspired about that. So since then, Wine with Brit has really grown to, I was doing private tastings. I was doing private seller consultations.
Really expanded to lots of different things just from this, let's say, rather simple idea of like, I need to stay active during COVID and like stay maintained. But it sounds like it really took kind of a brand of its own, which was really cool.
Yeah, and so fun. And also like global, staying in touch with wineries around the world. And that's, a great tool of how social media is, being able to talk to people like Paolo Venica and tagging him, staying in touch with him. And then when they do have the opportunity to visit the market, or like last year I had the opportunity to go to Vinitaly, meeting face to face, which is the magic of it all, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Full circle. So it basically just evolved into kind of just a sharing. I've definitely used it as a tool for the restaurant as well to highlight, new wines that we've brought on this week. We're a pretty big restaurant, so things are constantly moving in, moving out. So it's fun to highlight fun wines that we've brought on. I actually just signed up for my level 3 advanced Somm course.
Oh, congrats. That's exciting.
Thank you. Very exciting, very nerve-wracking. But I realized like there's really not a lot of people talking about their journey through these education, journey. So I'm like, I'm going to share. So I decided I'd talk about
your journey studying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just started. I'm starting a tasting group next week. So getting back into blind tasting, and, it's a way I think to share things that people don't know a lot about, including myself, because I'm like, this is new to me too. And so I don't see how other people are preparing for it. So really just to have this honest and kind of raw experience, sharing it with people, I thought would be pretty cool.
That's awesome. So just also using it as a platform for other people in the industry to see what it's like to study and embark on these journeys in studying, whether it's level 3 Court of Master Sommelier Advanced, or it's VIA, or any other thing that you're studying.
Right. WSET. Yeah, I did share a lot of my VIA journey as well. Like I remember drawing out the maps of the grapes and their journeys from either Greece or whether they come from the Baltics, or I remember showing like all the grape journeys and how they became what they were in
Oh, I love
Italy,
that.
and the different wines I was tasting, and what my flashcards looked like. And
Nice.
so it's really kind of just been like my wine diary is
Okay.
the best way I would describe it. But it's allowed me to meet friends in the industry. It's
For
allowed
sure.
me to create business opportunities. I share a lot about events that we have going on at the restaurant, which is exciting. So yeah, just a way to put myself out there.
Everything in there in wine. So it's both trade and consumer. It's what you're doing from a studying and education standpoint, which is probably more trade driven, but then what you're doing for consumers from events and what's happening at the restaurant as well.
Yeah.
Very cool. And are you seeing anything in the restaurant among your diners as far as how social media is like impacting what they're asking for when it comes to wine? Like, do you think that social media is playing a role in how they perceive and how they engage with wine?
Yeah, I think with specifically people at the restaurant here, they'll say, "Oh, I saw, we had like a Laurent Perrier champagne dinner here a few months ago." And so people are like, "I saw the Instagram." And so I signed up. But I also think even in my own personal use, I recently discovered Bacchanali, a Tuscan producer, through a Italian distributor that I just follow, Wild Vigneron, on Instagram. And it's not like they're distributing in the US, like they're distributing throughout in Italy. But I follow them and I discovered this winery and found out who carried it in Massachusetts and then brought it onto the restaurant. So even in just like my own discovery, I think that social media is huge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then, I think that there's so many different platforms, regardless of age. Like, for example, I've had a lot of older clientele that are still reading online magazines or newspapers, and that's how they're finding out about wine events throughout the city. But they're still online, so there's definitely a presence that I think people of all ages are relying on to discover different things about wine. So it's pretty cool.
Amazing. Very cool. So you're still seeing a combination generationally, like maybe the older consumer is still referencing some print publications, but younger consumers referencing more what's happening, what they're seeing online. And as like you said, for your own discovery and your own network, social media is such a powerful tool. I feel like LinkedIn's becoming more powerful too when it comes to just that networking and that interaction as well. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And TikTok too. It's like blowing up. So it's interesting to see, even from a winery's perspective, how they're marketing and, they are getting these younger generations to do their social media and it's working, so it's cool to see.
Definitely. That's definitely making an impact. Absolutely. Brittany, as we start winding down, we'll do our rapid fire quiz that we do at the end of every episode. So if you can do your best to answer these questions in just 1 or 2 sentences, please.
Sure.
Question number 1, what is your number 1 tip for mastering the U.S. wine market?
I would say to be open and to try new things.
Love it. Absolutely. Good fundamentals for life in general.
Yeah.
Question number 2, what is something you might have told your younger professional self about selling and working in the wine industry?
To remember that it's just wine. It's meant to be enjoyed, take it seriously to an extent and just have fun with it.
Have fun with it. Absolutely. We're all very lucky to be in this industry.
Oh,
it's a good reminder. Yes. What is one of your favorite travel hacks when you're on the road doing wine-related travel?
I love reaching out to people via Instagram. Like Instagram is really my main tool.
Okay.
So shooting a message to a restaurant ahead of time on Instagram, or like tagging maybe the som or the winery and trying to get any type of interaction going before I go to the restaurant or wherever I'm trying to go get a drink, or just to try to create a connection beforehand.
Yeah, I love that. That's a nice way to build community and like make it feel more personal when you're traveling. That's a great idea. I don't think anyone's shared that tip yet, so that's a unique one. And finally, what is your favorite wine bar in your hometown, whether that's Boston or upstate New York, when you're not at work?
I'll share one of both. So in Boston, there is this cozy little wine bar in South Boston called Gray's Hall. And the wine director there, TJ, really focuses on mainly natural, organic winemakers, which I typically don't buy for this restaurant. So it's fun to kind of try something new. And then in upstate New York, I love Saratoga Springs in upstate New York. There's a lot of different places, but there's a new wine bar there called Familiar Creature, and that's really fun. So I've enjoyed that as well.
Saratoga. Okay.
In Saratoga, yeah.
And then Gray's Hall in Boston.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the recommendations. I'll definitely have those on my maps for any time I'm in Boston and upstate New York or Saratoga. Well, Brittany, this was so much fun. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Of course. I'm assuming you're going to say Instagram, but how can our listeners connect and follow along with you and what you're doing up in Boston and in the world of wine?
Instagram, Wine with Brit. I also share a lot on my personal Instagram, which is Brittany Tang 31.
Okay.
And then Facebook, also Wine with Brit. Yeah, that's primarily where I share. Now I'm on TikTok.
Amazing. All right. Thank you again, Brittany. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you've enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.